Hey everybody, this is The Flash, and I am here with...
This is Harley Quinn.
And together we are...
The
Wonder Twins!
Wonder Twin powers, activate! Shape out an eagle!
Form of water!
Harley, hey! How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing awesome. So we've got a little bit of info for people that are listening this week.
Do we?
Yeah, we have to apologize first off that we don't have everything quite set up yet for iTunes. We are still working on the details for the RSS feed and connecting that to iTunes. There suddenly is a lot to do with it to make it fully operational. There's more than we realized, and we are very new to all of this, so it's taken more time than we had hoped to get everything set up. So please, everybody, bear with us. Do your best to listen to this week's episode as you have before, while we're still working on getting everything set up.
Yeah, we're working to get it fixed as quickly as possible, but we are brand new to this, and there's a little bit more involved. If you're curious, go try and figure out how to get an iTunes podcast set up. Just saying.
Just saying, exactly. I mean, we both work full-time jobs and we got lives going on, so we don't have a lot of time to sit and do all this other than the evenings, so it's just taking a little bit longer is all. But
it'll be there soon.
We appreciate your patience. We will hopefully try to get this up next week. We're working feverishly on it. So, but the fun news that we have, the exciting news, is there was some submissions to our Name the Podcast contest, and we did say we were going to pick a winner this week, and we have selected a winner.
Yay! It's so exciting. We have a name.
We do. We have selected one. So we do want to mention everybody that submitted a title for us. You guys were all runners up, but we had to come down to one final selection, and it came down to two. We hemmed and hawed and bounced back and forth between two of them. We were even creating little monologues and storylines to go with each name to sound out which one sounded better.
We really did, folks. We really did.
I think we probably talked for over an hour about it.
Shh, don't pull back the curtain too much.
So, we need to say thank you to Luke Housen. He submitted the name Heroes of Today, and that was a fun one. Sorry, we did not choose it. We also need to thank Chris Nessie. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce your guys' names. Chris Nessie submitted the name Wave Rider Chronicles. Very cool name. And then David Sanders actually submitted two. His first one was Overwatch, and we liked it, but Overwatch we felt more was designed for Arrow, because that's Felicity's new code name, so we really opted out of that one. But then his other name was Tomorrow's Legends. And what it came down to was Wave Rider Chronicles or Tomorrow's Legends. And after much debate, and we promise you we did debate for a long time, Harley, what did we go with?
Da, 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 da. Tomorrow's Legends.
Tomorrow's Legends! That is going to be the name of our new podcast. Once we have everything set up and organized, we want to have everything completely, fully operational before we release everything. So
it has to be that way to get into iTunes anyway.
Exactly. But we want to extend congratulations to David Sanders. We chose your name, Tomorrow's Legends, so thank you for that. That was kind of our first one. As soon as you sent it in, we kind of fell in love with it right away. And we're going to try to do a couple fun things with it. And so yes, you now get the bragging rights for naming the podcast. And if you want, we'll send you a private message. We'll contact you and talk to you about if you would like to come on as a guest speaker one time, which was the other part of the contest awards.
Yeah, that would be totally awesome. So, David, hopefully you're not too super shy because we're going to try and pull you on. But if you really, really, really don't want to, I suppose we'll let you off the hook. But it's fun. Trust us. Yes. It's really, really fun.
So now, with that, the next announcement, with our new show being called Tomorrow's Legends, there is going to be a new Facebook page dedicated to the Tomorrow's Legends podcast, which is going to be very similar to the Aero Squad page and the Central City Underground page. It's actually going to be a group page, so people will be able to ask to be a member, that we will allow, of course, and then you guys can post things on there and start discussion threads, and everything that you do on Air Squad and Central City you'll be able to do on this page, but it'll be dedicated to Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah. And, I mean, we'll ask that you guys keep the same etiquette. If you've come over from Air Squad and Central City, please, please, please do not post spoilers. If you post anything about the next show, please make sure that it is the content that's been approved or released from the CW, because neither one of us, we're not seeking out spoilers. I don't think Martin even watches the trailer, so.
Nope. And trust me, Harley is going to be watching this with very keen, discerning eyes.
That's right.
So if you post something on there, boy, she's going to come after you with that big hammer she likes to swing around.
Don't make me. Don't make me come after you.
Don't make her. The last little bit we want to definitely make sure we talk about here is we need to pass along some sincerest thank yous to the Shadow and Podcast Overlord from Aero Squad for mentioning us on the Aero Squad show last week. They gave us a little bit of props, a little bit of information to all the squad members there, talking about us, so that was very much appreciated. We thank you guys.
Thank you.
I mean, it basically is all because of you guys that we got into this. We started with you guys. You had us guest hosting on your show, and that's where the bug bit us. So thank you so much for supporting us and getting behind us, and spreading the word. We will try to do you proud. And then with that, we also want to say thank you to Tony and Joe over at Central City Underground, because they also did the same thing. Passed along information about us, and kind of put the word out there that we are now doing a Legends of Tomorrow podcast, and they hoped people from Central City would also join us. So thank you, Tony and Joe. They also had the idea that maybe we will do a crossover podcast sometime with them, seeing as how the shows are all very much linked, and the characters will be jumping back and forth on crossover events. So that sounds like a fun idea. We can't wait to get in it with them. Although I don't know about you, Harley, I'm a little bit nervous because they're such experienced, well-oiled podcasters.
I know they really are. I gotta remember. See, this is another thing when it's a podcast that I typically listen to. I have to remember to talk because I forget that I can talk.
You could be exactly.
But,
you let them talk and don't
exactly.
butt in, then
exactly.
Yeah.
But seriously, Tony and Joe, thank you very much. That would be completely awesome, and we're totally down for that.
Totally. So let's move into our feedback.
Sounds great.
All right, Harley. So we didn't really get a lot of feedback pertaining to the episode exactly last week. What I did want to do is point out rather than point out, I wanted to give a shout out to Bianca Horkin. Hope I pronounced that right. She kind of helped us out without us asking her to. When people were trying to find out where to find our show, she had posted the link to the Cybercast page. So Bianca, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's totally awesome.
That was totally awesome, and we would love to hear from you. If you're listening to the show, we want to hear what you think of us so far. So let us know.
Send us an email. You can send us a voicemail.
Yes, you can. And then just along that lines, if you are posting to the page or sending us feedback of any kind, and you have a superhero name because you're either part of Aero Squad or part of Central City Underground, and you've already established a name, please include that, because we don't know all of you yet. We don't have everyone memorized. We do know some of you from those other pages, so just let us know if you have a superhero name, and that way we can address you by that, just for for fun.
And then everybody knows who everybody is. So
yeah, exactly. Because you know us as Flash and Harley, so it'd be cool if we could call you by your guys' names and not your full personal names, in case you don't want that. So we really would like to get some feedback from you guys out there, so please, whether it's email or voicemail or however, personal Facebook message, We'd like to start
On the
hearing from
Facebook
you
page.
guys. Yeah, or the Facebook page. Exactly, Harley. We'd like to hear what you guys are thinking, not only about us and the new show, but about the episode. We want to be able to have some discussion from week to week with your guys' theories and thoughts to go along with not just with what we're thinking. Because we want to include you guys. So please, jump on board, just like we do in Aero Squad in Central City. Let's get a community going. That would be fun. All right, Harley, so let's jump into this week's episode, which was Season 1, Episode 4, titled White Knights.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think you were a little lukewarm on the episode, were you not?
I was. I think because we were so excited with last week how they seemed to have found their groove. This week they seem to not be on that groove as deeply into it. I don't even know how to word that. It was good. It was a fun episode, but it just didn't have that solid polish that build up that it had last week, where I really thought they were finding their way. So yeah, not as enjoyable as last week, but nonetheless, it still carried the story forward, and there was a lot of good plot points and stuff. Why? How'd you feel about it overall?
I think I liked it a little bit more than you did.
Yeah.
But it was, I think last week's episode was probably a little bit better because they had the whole build up to the big climactic scene at the end where they're battling Vandal Savage, whereas this week they kind of had a big group thing in the very beginning, which wasn't super actiony like it has been, and then they kind of got into the different storylines with the different missions and how everybody was doing their own thing.
Right.
So it was in that sense, it was definitely more fragmented, but I still liked it. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, before we dive right into all the individual episode points, I wanted to come back to a point we brought up a couple episodes ago, because I'm thinking we're going to start having a lot new listeners that may have not heard our earlier theories and questions, and I really, really want to get some people's thoughts on this. So I'm going to bring it back to one big one that we kind of made a big fuss over, which it might not even be a large point in the TV show, but we are really curious about Gideon. And I want to know what is going on with her, because for those of you that watch The Flash, Gideon is also on The Flash, but it's a different voice, but the same computer. And we had brought up a few ideas. Is it the same Gideon as on The Flash? So why does Rip Hunter now have her? Why does she sound different? Or is Gideon in the future a kind of like a standard computer system? Like nowadays everybody has either a Windows computer or a Mac computer. So is in the future, does everybody just have their own personal Gideon? And each one sounds different. And then along those lines, Harley, you had brought in the idea, is Gideon an acronym?
Yeah, so instead of maybe everything being called a Gideon, what if it's called that because it stands for something? Like, PC isn't it stand for personal computer, I think?
Yes.
So, like, everybody calls a PC because that's, what it is, regardless of whether it's a Mac or a Dell or an Asus or, whatever. So maybe Gideon, they call it Gideon because, Gideon actually stands for something that maybe the meaning got lost a long time ago. So.
And what could that be? It'd be interesting to see people come up with ideas. What would Gideon, if that's how they spell Gideon?
Oh, that's a good point. I was just assuming that's how they spell it.
Yeah. What could it stand for? General Interface, Diabolical Entertaining Online Network. I don't know.
That's fantastic.
There you go.
I have no idea. You got further than I did. It just occurred to me that what if, that's why she sounds different, even though she looks the same. It's kind of the same thing. If, we use computers these days and, a PC, so that made me think that maybe in the future they all use a Gideon and they don't call it a computer, personal computer, they call it a Gideon. And so that's kind of where I went with that. It's a little crazy, I know.
No, but it's actually a great idea, because who knows? And that, here we are, we're going way overboard again with this very minor point. It probably means nothing in the show, but we are just hooked on it because we watched The Flash. And what is Gideon? Why is it the same? We want to know. So help us out. What do you guys think? And then the other thing, just to go over, because it's been talked about on the other podcasts as well as on ours, is the whole time travel and its consequences. How time will continually correct itself if you try to change things. Mm-hmm. How things that have happened in the past. So if we were to travel back in time, things that have already happened are fixed points in time, and they cannot be changed or altered. So when you do try to change them, something else will happen to make that fixed point come true no matter what. It seems to be kind of a fate thing that once this has happened, there's no way to change it. It always will happen.
Yeah, since it's fated to happen or predetermined to happen, there's basically a course correction. So we saw that with Snart's father. No matter what he did, he was still destined to go to prison.
Exactly. So that's a perfect example. So that's another ongoing large topic I think that we have that we're kind of probably going to cover every episode. So anyone that has some ideas about that's what it looks like the way the show is going with the time travel writing. So it's we'd like to hear more ideas about that. All right, so into the episode itself. You were saying you felt things were a little bit mixed up this time?
Oh yeah, so last week there was very clear delineations in the teams. It was clearly Rip and Sara had their storyline. It was clear that Martin, Stein, and Ray had their storyline, and so on and so forth. Okay. Kendra was she was there, but she wasn't really there because she was unconscious most of the time.
Gotcha.
But this week, they had their teams, but then they kept kind of mixing in and coming back together, which made it in some ways actually flow a little better than it did the previous week because they weren't as segmented. They kind of flowed together. Mm-hmm. But for a while we had Ray and Captain Cold together, and then we had it was just like Rip and Heatwave, but then they kind of brought in Martin and Jax into kind of their mix, and then Sara kind of came in and out, and Kendra kind of came in and out, and then Kendra and Sara had their whole thing going on. So I thought that was kind of cool. It mixed things up. We're not set in, it's always going to be a Firestorm storyline. It's not always going to be a Rogue storyline with, Snart and McRory. I think that's his name. Mm-hmm. So I liked that about it.
Okay. Yeah. No, I see where you were going. Kind of like an Ocean's 11 feel, you were saying.
Oh yeah, well that was more towards the beginning. So, and this kind of goes to where I started, where they had the big team event in the beginning. That's what felt like Ocean's 11 to me, just kind of the way they shot it and the way they approached it. I thought that was pretty cool. And then as you kind of went through the episode, it broke down into the different missions and the different teams. Then everybody kind of started flowing together, and then most of them kind of came together at the end. Half of them got captured and half of them didn't. So
yes, well, we'll get to that part.
We'll get there
for sure. So back to the beginning. What I think maybe where it led me astray right off the bat, because even in the trailers leading up to this, they were talking about it. We're headed back to the 80s, and they were really pumping up this whole 80s thing. So I was kind of looking forward to an 80s style, just like last week everything was 70s with the clothing and the music and the style. I thought, great, this is going to be fun. Now we're going to get into the 80s with the really wackiness that the 80s had. And there was nothing. They showed up in the 80s, and there was no music references, there was no clothing styles or hairdos or anything like that, because all they did was go to the Pentagon, which everybody's dressed in uniform.
Yeah.
And that was the first third of the show, and then boom, they end up traveling to Russia. And the rest of the show was all in Russia. So there was the whole 80s vibe was just completely lost.
Yeah,
and it had nothing to do with it.
That was kind of a little disappointing. Maybe because next week we should still be in the 80s since everybody's been captured. So
Yep.
But I guess again we'll be in Russia. I don't know. Maybe somehow they'll have some mission they'll have to get more of like an 80s vibe. That would be kind of cool.
With a little bit of fun, maybe.
Yeah, or maybe the next like couple, maybe they won't leave 1986 next week. So you never know. There's that as an option.
Well, that's actually a point I was thinking about. Is it seems like they're staying in one time period for a couple episodes. Did you notice that? Because the first few were all in the 70s, right? It's not like they jump back and forth. Other than the flash forwards of the future with Vandal Savage, it's mostly been in the 70s, and now we're kind of in the 80s. So it'd be interesting to see if they stay here for a couple episodes or if they move on yet again.
Yeah, well, I think at least next episode they'll have to stay there, but we'll see.
And then with that opening group, did you find in the beginning they all seem to be pointing fingers and at each other's throats right in the beginning, where everything last episode everything kind of ended like they were together and finding building friendships, and then this time it's like it kicks right off and they're all pointing fingers. It's your fault. No, it's your fault.
Yeah, I did think that was a little interesting because they were all kind of like together and gung ho, and then you get the great mission in the beginning, and then slowly everything goes wrong. And so it was interesting to see the reaction of the team, because you can tell that they haven't completely bonded as a team yet, because they're immediately just throwing blame and just trying to like preserve themselves, kind of. It wasn't my fault.
Right, which kind of shows us that it's still going to take some time for them to really gel and really build that team camaraderie, and they're still there for each other. They still have each other's back, but when something goes wrong, they're not quite supportive of each other yet.
Yeah, they're not willing to own up to their mistakes necessarily, maybe, or maybe they kind of did. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seemed like everyone was like, well, it was your fault that this happened, and it was your fault that this happened.
Yeah, they're basically they're redirecting it is what they were doing.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing I loved when they were about ready to go start on their mission to go to Russia. I love Brandon Routh's boyish charm that he has. Like they're getting the plan ready and they're taking off to Russia, and he's just got this excitement like a kid entering the gates of an amusement park with this big smile on his face, and he's woo. I just loved it, and his little quote about from Top Gun movie. I thought that was great. MiG-21, no one's ever been this close. I think, of course, Captain Cole acknowledges, was that a quote from Top Gun? Maybe.
There were a lot of good, almost like throwaway lines and like little one-liners like that. Like there's too many to write down, but there's a lot of good little lines like that.
There was,
throughout the whole episode.
Well, you are the quote queen, so we'll see how many you come up with this time.
Yeah, I only grabbed a couple because, like I said, I would have been pausing the episode every 20 seconds and typing something out. So I would have just transcribed the whole thing. Was pretty much what would have happened.
Yes.
So I had to pump the brakes a little bit in the beginning because there's a lot of good one-liners.
Well, we'll pick out a few of your favorites then as we go along.
Yeah,
for sure. I was curious about this character Chronos, because now he's kind of, it looks like he's following them through the storyline every episode. So I had to look him up because I had never heard of Chronos. I'm not sure if you knew who he was.
I have never heard of this before, but that's not surprising. I don't have as strong of a comics background. I honestly thought they made him up for the show.
Yeah, and it seemed the way the show's going about it seems like he is kind of an agent for these time. What do we call it? Time masters. Yeah,
or
it seems
time lords.
I don't know if he is a time master himself or if he's just an agent kind of guy that works for them, but that's what they're building him up to be. So I actually looked him up, and in the DC Comics history, he actually is a villain of Adam, interesting enough.
That is interesting.
Which I thought was kind of funny because Adam is in the show, but
but he's an adversary of Rip in this incarnation of it.
And that's okay, because I mean with Arrow and Flash and whatever, they are rewriting different things from the comics so that it's not so predictable and we know what's going to come, because
True.
you're following the comic books exactly. So
Right.
in the comic book history, the lore of it, he started out as a petty thief, and when he was caught and thrown in prison, and he started studying the passing of time and timing everything in his prison cell. You know, like things like exactly when the guards were on their shift and how they did their routes, and when doors were unlocked and when meals were brought. He basically started following different timing of everything, and he became obsessed. And eventually, when he got out of prison, he started building devices that could manipulate time. He was able to freeze moments in time so that he could move about for a few seconds while everybody else was frozen. He could slow things down. All these different time-related things without getting in it too differently. And eventually, he became powerful enough that he could time travel himself.
Interesting.
So that's kind of the history of the character named Chronos. And he came and gone quite a few times. He fought the Atom, and he fought the Justice League and the Justice Society. He was all over the place. So it's kind of cool. So I don't know if that is who this Chronos is supposed to be, but interesting. Anyway, I just thought I'd look that up for everybody in case everyone was wondering, because I was wondering.
Yeah, and I was wondering too. And they may have just simply taken it because they like the name, because, Chronos doesn't Chronos mean, or chrono mean time in Latin or Greek or something?
Yes, you're right. It does have something to do with time in the...
Which makes sense for the character that was manipulating time, as well as the character that's traveling through time as a kind of like he's like a bounty hunter, isn't he?
That's what it seems like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then moving on to this Pentagon scene. I mean, I made the note about it. I thought it was kind of funny. Running around the Pentagon, Firestorm blasting through the roof, and all this fighting and destruction. Isn't that kind of causing a little bit of suspicion and paranoia within the security and the government? You know how they can be.
Yes.
I thought it was kind of funny, and of course later on in the episode they kind of explain it away, which I'll let you go on. I just at the moment I thought, wait a second, you can't just run around the Pentagon destroying things. Like, this is a government stronghold.
Yeah, I know, and I agree. I don't disagree with your point. Like, you're totally right. They definitely raised some flags. I mean, the only thing I can think of is, one, they did explain it away later, saying that the EMP destroyed the security footage, so that there's not, I guess, an official record of who they were or what they were doing. But at the same time, all of those people that were there were definitely going to be a little bit more paranoid, or like more heightened security or something, because they witnessed it. I mean, just because there's no video footage of it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So I'm sure that it did cause like some level of paranoia, but because we didn't go back, we probably didn't see the aftermath of all of that. But
yeah, and I just think to things like in reality, like Area 51 and stuff like that. You got some lowly security guard or key checking guy, and he's like, I saw a guy light on fire and blast through the roof. Well, the government's gonna shut him up so he doesn't go telling everybody. So it was all that kind of stuff that was running through my mind. Like, how many people witnessed all these different things happening that they've never seen before? How are they going to contain all that? And it was just kind of a throwaway moment. And
no, it's a good point. It's a little bit of a plot hole, I would say.
I mean, yeah, sure, the EMP blast, gets rid of all the video footage, so now it's basically you have to trust their word, and they can all just say, you're crazy, something's the matter with you, and that's that. But anyways, it was just a point I wanted to bring up because it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, I agree. But at that point, it's just like, it's just someone's word. So if the government says you're crazy, I guess you're crazy.
You're crazy. You can't argue that. And then, of course, when they were escaping, we saw Kendra kind of lose control, and that's the first time we've seen that. You saw her eyes glow red, and she just kind of went on the attack, and it didn't seem to matter who she was attacking. I mean, she was all out wings and claws and slicing and dicing. And
she was after blood.
Yeah, and Sara was trying to stop her, and it actually took Firestorm to fly in and scoop her away, basically. What is that? Is that... So trying to theorize what's going on there. is she not able to control her inner warrior when Carter is not around? Is it like two souls are one, and now that the one is dead, she is unstable?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you got going on with that?
Well, I definitely like that idea. I think it's really interesting because she does have a line later in the episode where she says that without Carter around, it's harder to control. And so I thought that was a very interesting point, and it does bring up the question of, are they really intertwined or are they not? I mean, the way they were trying to explain in a way in this episode was that they were trying to liken her inner goddess, priestess, warrior to Sarah's kind of inner demons and monster from being resurrected. And so there were a lot of parallels there that I really liked. So to me, it kind of seemed like she was definitely losing control, so that her priestess, inner warrior, was taking over, and she wasn't Kendra anymore. She was just out for like a bloodlust, almost similar to Sarah. So I kind of like that they paired them together so that, Sarah could maybe help Kendra control Shiara, but then Kendra could help maybe Sarah reconnect with her humanity. I don't know. Maybe they could both help each other out and gain more control. I think that's how they were trying to play it in the episode. But I really like the idea and wonder about why she is so unstable, because we didn't really see that before.
No, that was the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't lose control like that. So it is interesting to see, and I wonder if maybe it's just her manifestation of grief. So when Shiara kind of comes out and like takes over, because she hasn't fully merged. Like, I feel like Kendra and Shiara are still two different, distinct people. So maybe when Shiara kind of comes out and does her thing, she's angry because Carter's dead, and that's all she cares about.
Interesting ideas.
There's a lot.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, but I do like your idea that her and Sarah, and I liked how the show did it as well, how bringing them together, they can help each other because they both are struggling with an inner, whether you want to call it an inner demon or an inner torment. They are having a struggle, so and it's like Sarah's trying to find her humanity, and Kendra's trying to reconnect with her past life. So I think they can help each other, and that
they
might
just gotta
really
find a way to do it.
Yeah, and it might really build a strong bond between the two of them. So yeah, no, I definitely I like where you were going with that, and it'd be cool to see what they do with it, how it's gonna continue along.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of the quotes that I liked. I kind of paraphrase it a little bit here, but you have to accept that it's a part of you, channel your anger, focus on your opponent, and that sort of thing. I liked the way she was doing that when they were kind of battling the first time.
Right. I guess we'll see where they take that.
Yeah.
And if it has anything connected to Carter or not, because it's kind of funny the timing of it, that she's losing control after Carter's gone.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely connected to him somehow, whether it's deeper, like because like their souls were entwined, or whether it's simply just she's angry because her, lover is dead. I don't know.
So another point I wanted to bring up, which just a minor point, but I thought was very cool, was those translator pills.
Those were so cool.
In the beginning of the episode, before we get too far, I just thought that was just a cool little sci-fi futuristic piece of tech that reminded me of like the universal translators in Star Trek. It was just cool to be able to swallow a pill and then speak any language you want, but in your mind you're still speaking English.
I know.
That was cool.
And that was an easy way to explain away not having to have the actors, speak in Russian and go through all that like expense and editing and us having to read subtitles. They just came up with cool little tech that said, oh, by the way, you think you're speaking English and everybody thinks you're speaking Russian, but you're also hearing English even though someone else is speaking Russian. So everybody spoke English and it was easy.
It was pretty cool. Yep. I really like that. I would like to get one.
Yeah, right. It'd be awesome.
Yes. And then moving into when they actually were in Russia, just another little point here with Captain Cold. I really liked he just seemed to fit into the whole, I don't even know how to word this, but just being in Russia and around Russian people and how they, I mean, in the 80s they were always perceived as being kind of cold and cool and collected and mysterious in that sense, and it just seemed the perfect setting for Captain Cold, because he I mean, there's poor Ray Palmer trying to flirt with the Russian scientist and just not getting anywhere. He's failing big time. And Captain Cold just comes sliding in, cool as ice, and wins her over in a matter of a few lines. And one of the ones that you quoted here was one of your favorites.
He says, "I love the cold." I was like, really? That's just too perfect. This is so great. I love Wentworth Miller. He's killing this role.
He is totally killing it. And like I said, it was neat to see him get to play kind of the cool, suave, almost secret agent type of role, and he did the part perfectly. Where Ray Palmer failed, crashed and burned, he just came in there and swept her off her feet, and she actually invited him back to her apartment to heat things up. And
Sure
I thought, way to go, Captain Cold. You did good there.
definitely.
Another point, you know what, we talked about it last week, but I didn't actually include it in the podcast. We were talking about Jackson and his acting here, and I'm going to bring it up again because it happened again this episode. The way he is shortening his words, because you were asking me exactly what I was meaning last week, and he is shortening his words. He is cutting off the last letter of each word that he speaks, and it's bugging me. It's 2 episodes in a row now, and it's actually bugging me. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's supposed to be him just being a street punk kind of guy where he's lacking the education, or so I don't know. Did you hear it this time? Did you know what I was talking about?
All right, so I think what they're trying to do here is like you said, maybe make him seem more immature, make him seem kind of like a street punk, and kind of get that contrast between him and Martin Stein. Because Martin Stein's this like older, polished, renowned scientist. He's very educated, very brilliant. And then there's Jackson, he's smart in his own way. I mean, we see he's intelligent. He was a football star. I think they said he had like a 4.0. I mean, he's not a dumb kid.
No, not at all.
But after they went, in this next scene when Stein goes on this whole rant, I think the whole point is like he's immature. He's a little arrogant, and they're just having trouble working together. I think they're just trying to make them look more apart.
Right, and that could just be story elements that they're not going to get along right away. They're still figuring out sharing a body, sharing a mind, and all that kind of stuff. I totally understand that. It really just was a minor, like a nitpick, that the way he's speaking and cutting off the last letter of each word. To me, and I guess it's because I like language. I like speaking properly or communicating properly, and to me it just sounds lazy. It's very lazy to talk that way, and so that's why it kind of just irked me a little bit.
It's definitely, it's bothering you.
Yeah.
I can see that.
But from that scene, Martin Stein, Victor Garber, was just fantastic. His whole, explosive sequence there with him.
I know, he's so good.
Oh, he is so good, and it was, and that's where I found the balance was off, because watching Victor Garber play his part of that argument, I was just wow, and then listening to Jackson go off, I was like, ow, don't stop talking.
Yeah, but you kind of get to see a little bit later when Martin Stein's in that chamber thing, and then Jax is back on the ship because he was injured. You can kind of see him trying to be the other side. So he's trying to talk Stein through something, and Stein's like, "Wow, you're right. That is so distracting."
Yes.
And so it was kind of nice that they had that role reversal, and so I think that's going to help them. And did you feel like in that scene, was his speech any better to you, or was it still kind of the same?
Yeah, no, and by that point, yeah, it definitely had turned around, and I was now caught in the moment of the scene, and it was a very dramatic moment, and
it was great.
Yeah, and with some humor, because like you said, Martin Stein was realizing, whoa, that must be what it's like having my voice in your head. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
And it really connected the two of them. It bonded them a little bit more. So yeah, no. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I'm not being bothered by Jackson. And at this point, he's like, I like the character. And I like I like seeing the two of them trying to work together. It's just...
I know. I still miss Ronnie, though. I loved Robbie Amell.
I do. I love Robbie Amell as well. Like, I was a huge fan of the Tomorrow People, and I was hoping for great big things for him to really become a full-on member of whatever one of these shows, and it's just funny he doesn't get to be. It's unfortunate.
I know. It is unfortunate. Maybe he's the man in the mask. Sorry, that was a Flash reference.
So on to the next really cool thing that I loved in this episode. Probably, actually, I would have to say it's my favorite part of the episode, was seeing Captain Cold and Heatwave get to kind of play the heroic role.
I know.
It was fantastic to see, especially Captain Cold. He got to have a bit of an action sequence. I mean, he's hopping over railings and sliding down cables and running and gunning and, rescuing the crate with the whatever the heck that thing was called in it.
Oh, the thermocore.
The thermocore, thank you.
I'm pretty sure they sort of made that word up. I mean,
Probably.
it's not wrong, physics speaking, but it's pretty made up. Anyway.
I loved that sequence for Captain Cold. It was great. And then seeing Heatwave was kind of coming in to help them out because him and Captain Cold and Dr. Stein were getting trapped and outnumbered, so Heatwave comes in as the backup. Mm-hmm. And he's taken down a lot of guys, but he's basically creating a diversion and having all the bad guys come after him, and he was outnumbered, and he's just like, just take the thermocore and get out of here. I got it. And you see him kind of going down, and they're outnumbering him. And what a moment for both of them. It was such a great moment for Captain Cold to have a bit of his own action scene. Mm-hmm. And then a moment for Heatwave to come in and be the backup and be the hero. Like, you guys get out of here. I'll take them on. Just get that thing out of here. The mission is more important than me right now.
Yeah.
It was just a fantastic scene for both of them.
It was, and it kind of showed a lot of growth. They were, instead of being in it for themselves, they were willing to help out the team and kind of do that. So. That's
exactly why I loved it too, is because it showed them being more concerned about the team than about themselves.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the episode ends with Heatwave kind of going down. We don't know what's happened to him. He got captured. He was led away to the truck in handcuffs, kind of thing. So that kind of brings us back, and I could do a little shout out to our friend Yogabon here, because last episode she kind of thought he went down. Well, this episode he does go down, so we don't know what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a possibility he might actually die this time around. So hopefully not.
But I'm really, really liking Heatwave. I love he's kind of the muscle of the group. And he doesn't seem like he's very smart, but he seems to understand everything. He's very observant and gets it. He may not come across as being intelligent, but he actually is.
Right, yeah. It's definitely street smarts for sure.
Yeah,
but it's definitely valuable to the team.
So those are some of my points. I know you've got a few things you wanted to bring up. Let's talk about what you noticed.
Yeah, I just had a couple things that I kind of... Well, a couple of these are more overarching, like, where is this going to go from here? But I wanted to go back to this Time Master thing in Chronos a little bit.
Okay.
Well, maybe less Chronos, but this other Time Master guy that kind of shows up. And, like, the minute he set foot on screen, I'm like, nope, don't listen to him. He's lying. I don't know what he's going to do to you, but he's not going to do what he said he's going to do, so... You
knew not to trust him right off the bat.
Yeah, even before Heatwave was like, that guy's going to kill you, right? And so I thought it just kind of just brings up a really interesting thing to me, because we have two villains. So these Time Lords are going to keep hunting them down and trying to track them down throughout time, because they're messing with everything. And so they're not only having to battle with these guys and deal with this Chronos guy, now they're ultimately dealing with Vandal Savage and like kind of his villains and his goons that he has. So they're almost fighting like a battle on two fronts, which, as we know from history, never goes well.
No, it's an excellent point. I actually didn't even think of that, because Chronos has kind of just popped in and out a couple times, and the main focus has been on Savage, but this episode really solidified your point that, hey, wait a sec, they are fighting two fights right now. And as much as Chronos and the Time Masters may not be the evil type of bad guy that Savage is, they are still opponents. And
Yeah.
yeah,
They've created another enemy Rip has created another enemy by disregarding what they said and what needs to play out and going back and changing time anyway.
wasn't there something, didn't Rip, or was it Rip or was it the other Time Master that said Savage is a part of history and he has to be there or something like that?
It was the Time Master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes me wonder now, how does that affect their mission? If Savage is a part of their history and it can't be changed, that brings it back to this time travel thing. Is he a fixed point in time that they cannot fix? They cannot alter by trying to get rid of him? Because if that's the case, then no matter what they do, Savage is always going to come to power. He is always going to destroy the world in the future.
Yeah, and right now all they're doing is making it worse instead of making it better.
Right, which leads into your next point that you wanted to bring up.
We've got these villains, we've got Vandal Savage, and in this episode, I liked that we weren't up against Savage. We were up against some scientists he recruited. So it was still towards the overall mission of getting to Savage without us seeing the same thing week in, week out, the team versus Savage. I like that.
Yeah, and that's a good point to make, because they brought that up on Arrow Squad, actually. They talked about it. It's going to get a little boring if every week from episode to episode it's, we got to track down Vandal Savage, and here he is, but oops, we missed him by a few minutes. Don't really get to catch him. And
right.
on to go to the next episode.
Yeah, so that was going to get a little bit old. But then kind of going back to what we were talking about here so Savage, he's building a Soviet version of Firestorm, which was very interesting to me because that's another twist and another ripple throughout time. So they've introduced themselves to Savage in the past. So now he knows that they're there, and he sort of has an advantage because they're jumping through time. But since he's immortal, he's using all of those years to figure out how to re-engineer the science or the technology or whatever they are. So he's advancing science more quickly than it needs to be.
Using, based on everything that they keep accidentally introducing to him.
Exactly.
He is by no means a dummy. He's like, aha, look at that.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's got the next 15 years to develop that into
exactly.
what he needs it for.
Yeah, and he knows what's going on. He knows they're obviously traveling through time because of the hints that they dropped in the pilot of, well, not from this era. He's like, oh, you're from the future.
Right.
So, I don't know. So I thought that was kind of cool. It's all, going back to Flash, it's like their version of doppelgangers, maybe. So instead of seeing literally carbon copies of yourself as a villain on Earth 2, you're seeing Vandal Savage creating another Firestorm, but an evil Firestorm, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get to see that. That would be really cool if we get to see that. But.
And that'd be something to look up. I wonder if there is a Russian version of Firestorm in the comic books, or because that, in the 80s, that was a huge deal. U.S. versus Russia in the Cold War, and they're each trying to beat each other at the exact same things. So,
right.
I believe in the Iron Man, if we switch to the Marvel Universe for a second, in Iron Man, there is a Russian counterpart to him, and I can't remember his name, but there's a Russian guy that has an armored suit full of power as well. So that this could be the very same idea, which, like you're saying, if Vandal Savage can create a Russian Firestorm, that would alter history. It would give Russia a huge advantage. And so and I think that's what makes it exciting that this episode was not a single one-off episode. It left us hanging.
Right. They have to revisit it.
Yeah, we're left in Russia. Half the team got captured. Half the team doesn't know what's going on, and we have to still figure that out. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they let the Russians and Savage get away with in this 1986 time period.
Right, yeah.
Good.
I will like to see how they end up ending all of it or bringing it all together.
Yeah. Well, and kind of like what you were alluding to, by them continually exposing this technology and their superpowers and stuff to Savage in the past, every time they catch up to him a little farther in the future, he is much stronger than he was before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is going to get a little convoluted. When they first found out about him in 2016, nobody had seen him or heard about him or anything. He was just this guy who lived forever. And eventually, by 2166, he's strong enough to destroy the world and take over.
Mm-hmm.
But now they've gone back in time and have introduced a bit of technology, introduced superpowers, introduced a few other things, and he is now, as the timeline is going along at its regular pace, he is becoming more and more knowledgeable and powerful, so that by the time they get to, say, 2016, he is going to know way more than he did originally, and I think events will be happening a lot sooner in the timeline. He may destroy the world or take over the world by 2016 instead of 2166.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that is the point they're trying to make with all these ripples in time. But the question I have is we've already seen 2016 played out as a fixed point, and not all of these players were involved. So they're going to have to find some way around that because Vandal Savage, I mean, I guess Sara wasn't there, and none of the players that are there now were present at that original battle because it was Arrow and Speedy and that
And
team
Flash.
and Flash, and
Yeah.
they're not present right now. So I guess they
Well,
might be able to write around it because he already knows who Hawkman and Hawkgirl are because they've been having this battle, for centuries.
Right.
But now that Carter's dead, I'm talking myself. This is bad. This is gonna unravel really quickly because Carter's dead, but he's already been in 2016 and come from 2016. So when they get back to 2016, they're gonna find him again. That's how they find him again.
That's how they find it?
Get
Well,
back to 2016.
oh man, see, this is, yeah,
Crazy.
I would not want to be one of the writers for this show because, man, they are spinning themselves some crazy circles and mazes right now.
Hmm. See, that's why I would want to be a writer for this show. I find it fascinating.
It
If
is
they can,
totally.
but only if they can pull it off
If they can, yeah. So this is going to be a big
without.
payoff. How is this going to come around full circle to itself? Are we eventually going to get back to 2016, or are we eventually going to go into the future? Because so far they've done the 70s and now the 80s. Does that mean the 90s is next? Does that mean the 2000s are next? Or are we going to go? Are they going to decide? You know what? Maybe we should go back to 1940 and try to stop them then. Maybe we should go all the way back to Egypt in 2000 BC and try to stop them then. Or is it just going to continue to go forward every decade?
I've been wondering that because we've gone from the 70s to the 80s. So I was like, oh, are we just going to keep going? Or at some point, either to skip this anomaly, they either have to skip over 2016 entirely, or they have to be very creative with how the next episode plays out.
Right.
Or careful, I guess, not creative. But
Well, because yeah, if they're going a decade at a time, we're gonna hit 2016 in essentially 2 more episodes, and then what? I mean, we've got 10 more episodes after that to go, so I'm thinking something has to happen. They have to either time jump farther back or farther into the future.
yeah, they're gonna. See, this is why I find this show very interesting because, I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch and there's a lot going on, and I can see why a lot of people just want to sit back and enjoy it and they don't want to overthink it. But all of the time travel stuff, especially if they can, in the end, they can pull it off. It's just really fascinating to me to see how it all plays out. Anyway, that's all I had. Did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I think that the episode got better as it went along. I think once they were in Russia and the plan started falling apart, that's when it really took off for me, and I really dove in and thought, okay, now it's getting serious. Now it's back in that groove that it had last week. It'll be interesting to see what comes next week. We have half the team to rescue, because who was captured? We got Heatwave captured,
Martin
Stein captured,
Ray Palmer.
Ray Palmer is captured.
I think that's it,
That
because
is it.
Kendra and Sara were on the ship, Rip was on the ship, Jax was on the ship. So yeah.
Okay.
And Cold escaped. So.
And Cold escaped with the thermal core, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those guys now have to come to the rescue.
Yep.
Oh, you know what? Another point to bring up, which might be interesting, is when Martin Stein was within that little chamber about to grab the thermocore, how he tested his limits, how much radiation he could absorb when he's only half of the firestorm.
That was very interesting.
And it seemed like he could handle it, because the thermocore got turned back on, and he grabbed it, and it looked like it was about to knock him out, but it didn't. He eventually, I'm guessing he absorbed the radiation energy, or it just didn't affect him. I wasn't exactly sure what they were doing with that, but...
Well, it doesn't affect him for one, so that's why he was able to step inside and while it was still on. Otherwise, his face would have been melted off, sort of, in a manner of speaking. Radiation is nasty, nasty, nasty stuff that you don't want to mess with. But because he has been affected by the Firestorm Matrix, he can absorb this, and he's not affected by radiation, because essentially that's what him and Jax are. I mean, they're a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
So he was able to go in and absorb the power, similarly to what they do when they're together, but because they're not together, he can't absorb as much.
Okay.
So he absorbed all of this is where it gets into very hand-to-hand-wavy science and physics. But he absorbs, I guess, essentially all the radioactive energy, and so it's an inert core that's left. There's no material to interact with anymore. Although then why they want the core, I don't know. I don't know if maybe Firestorm can reignite it, or they just didn't want the Soviets to keep it so that they couldn't reignite it, I guess. But
well, I think whatever that device that he pulled it out of, that device was essentially like an on-off switch to engage it. So once he pulled it off of there, the thing is shut down. So they can probably rebuild something on the ship to re-engage the thermocore. And because to me, it's like a battery, I guess. You plug the battery in, and it powers everything up. So they took the battery out, and that machine doesn't work now.
Kind of, except that's not how nuclear energy really works. But the comic book shows, so hand-wavy science. I won't lecture everybody on how nuclear physics really works.
Well, I am quite impressed if you understand how nuclear power
works. I have a degree in particle physics. Did I not mention that?
You have not mentioned that.
I do.
Wow.
So I actually do understand how it works.
Harley Quinn, you just upped your villainous meter by a lot.
Wow.
You are a dangerous villain to mess with.
I know. Better be careful. Flash.
Yeah.
Super speed can only save you so many times.
Well, now we're gonna have to see what what they do with that. So that your explanation and everything, that actually brings a lot more information to light, so we can see what happens with that next episode. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Miss Harley Quinn, the nuclear physicist.
I don't actually get to do anything with it, so the best I have is picking apart comic book shows or scouring news articles.
All right, Harley. Well, this was a fun episode and fun to talk to you again. We will see you next week in 1986 Russia and see what they do. See how our misfit band of heroes gets out of this.
I know. Until next time.
Until next time. This is Flash signing off.
And I'm Harley Quinn. I'm out.